Lee Duffy, born in 1965, after he was killed in 1991, was an English former amateur boxer, nightclub bouncer, and notorious criminal enforcer from South Bank in Middlesbrough, Teesside, renowned for his fearsome reputation in the local underworld during the 1980s and early 1990s, known by his nicknames such as the Duff or the Duffer. He rose to prominence through violent exploits, including surviving 3 alleged assassination attempts, 2 shootings, and 1 involving petrol poured over him, while regularly carrying a firearm and engaging in high-risk behaviours like playing Russian roulette. As a key figure in Teesside's organised crime scene, Duffy acted as a taxman, collecting debts and exerting influence over local gangland activities, forging alliances such as his early friendship with gangster Stephen Sayers, which began during their youth at Low Newton Remand Centre in 1982. His life ended abruptly on August the 25th, 1991, at the age of 26 when he succumbed to a stab wound inflicted during a street brawl on Martin Road in Middlesbrough, an incident that led to the acquittal of his attacker, David Allison, on grounds of self-defence at Teesside Crown Court in 1993. Duffy's funeral in September 1991 drew hundreds of mourners and a massive floral tribute requiring 2 lorries, underscoring his enduring status in Teesside folklore, later documented in books. At the end of the 2020 film Lee Duffy, Too Far, Too Soon. Lee Duffy was born in 1965 in South Bank, Middlesbrough, into a troubled family environment defined by poverty, instability, and abuse from his heavy drinking father, whose behaviour included physical beatings that would be unacceptable by modern standards. His mother, Brenda, later recalled him as a mischievous yet soft and loving child, but family problems created a home he often avoided, leading him to wander the local estate late at night, even on school nights. South Bank, a working-class enclave of terraced brick housing overshadowed by steelworks and slag heaps, offered limited opportunities amid the heavy industry boom and bust during Duffy's formative years in the 1960s and 1970s. The area grappled with social challenges, including rampant industrial pollution, multi-generational poverty, and a sharp rise in unemployment following the late 1970s and 1980s closures of key employers like the Dom and Long Steel Works, which left thousands jobless and fueled family breakdowns. High crime rates and gang activity exposed residents, including young Duffy, to street violence from an early age, normalising aggression in a community once thriving on apprenticeships but increasingly marked by dereliction and hopelessness. Duffy's earlier years were marred by severe bullying until he was around age 14, when he was often attacked and would run home crying, sometimes protected by a sympathetic young girl. This period of vulnerability, compounded by family turmoil, fostered behavioural issues that saw him transform into a bully himself, setting the stage for an aggressive persona amid ongoing personal demons. Accounts of his life describe this troubled childhood as contributing to a Jekyll and Hyde duality, soft and affectionate at home, yet increasingly hard-edged outside, though his toughness developed gradually rather than innately. Lee Duffy was born and raised in South Bank area of Middlesbrough, where his early life was marked by significant family challenges that contributed to his combative development. Details on his parents remain limited in public accounts, but his father was described as a heavy drinker whose physical abuse toward Lee created an atmosphere of fear and instability within the household. This dysfunctional home environment characterised by frequent family problems, led young Duffy to avoid returning home after school, often wandering the estate late into the night, even on school nights. His mother, Brenda Duffy, later portrayed him as a mischievous child who was soft and loving in his youth, highlighting a contrasting view of his early vulnerability before the hardening effects of his circumstances took hold. He had at least one sister, though details on siblings remain sparse. In prominent accounts, interviews with family and childhood acquaintances reveal that Duffy endured severe bullying at school until around age 14, frequently running home in tears until a turning point prompted by a shift towards self-defense through boxing. This exposure to both familial violence and external aggression fostered survival instincts that later manifested in his unpredictable and fiercely loyal personality traits, as are recounted in true crime accounts of Teeside's underworld figures. While specific surrogate mentors from South Bank's local hardman community are not well documented, the broader rough neighbourhood dynamics paralleling the social issues of poverty and unrest in the area, amplified by the influence of his immediate family troubles, instilling a combative nature from an early age. Lee Duffy entered amateur boxing during his early teens in the late 1970s, training as one of many local youngsters at the Grangetown Amateur Boxing Club in Middlesbrough under coach Marty Turner. The club's Allco Road Gym, officially opened in 1980, became a hub for aspiring fighters from Teeside's working class communities, including South Bank where Duffy grew up, providing a structured outlet for physical development amid the area's tough environment. Duffy was a former amateur boxer who never turned professional, gifted and focused by his early 20s, boxing owned skills that later proved useful in informal confrontations during his bouncer work as a bouncer. In the mid-1980s, Lee Duffy transitioned into working as a bouncer in pubs and clubs across Middlesbrough, utilising his background in amateur boxing to manage physical confrontations with unruly patrons. Standing at 6 feet tall and weighing around 17.5 stone, his imposing physique and combat skills made him an effective enforcer in the rowdy nightlife scene of Teesside. Duffy rapidly built a reputation for handling disruptive individuals with overwhelming force, often resolving incidents single-handedly and becoming a staple at local venues. Accounts from the period describe him confronting and overpowering groups of troublemakers, such as taking on 3 doormen at once, which cemented his presence in Middlesbrough's security circles. Him to forge initial connections within local social networks that extended beyond club doors and criminal activities. By the late 1980s, Lee Duffy had transitioned from his role as a bouncer to become deeply involved in Teesside's burgeoning drug trade and protection rackets, where he imposed levies on local dealers to assert control over illicit operations. Standing at 6 feet tall and weighing 17.5 stone, Duffy utilised his physically imposing presence and propensity for violence honed from his earlier boxing career to intimidate smaller operators and establish dominance in Middlesbrough and surrounding areas. Duffy formed strategic alliances with other local gangsters, positioning himself as a key enforcer who orchestrated widespread disruption across the region, often without reliance on a structured gang hierarchy. His ascent was propelled by a fearsome reputation for unpredictability, as he could shift from jovial camaraderie to explosive aggression, combined with unwavering loyalty For those who earned his trust as an associate later reflected, Lee was very loyal to his friends. If you had his back, then he would have yours, but if you wronged him, he would never forget it. This blend of traits enabled him to govern territories through sheer intimidation. Role as a taxman, Lee Duffy earned notoriety as one of the taxmen of Teeside through his partnership with Brian Cockrell, a duo that targeted drug dealers across the region by demanding and collecting substantial taxes in form of money, drugs, or other assets in exchange for protection from violence or interference. Their collaboration began in 1991 after an initial confrontation that evolved from enmity into an alliance, allowing them to dominate extortion schemes in the local underworld. Duffy's operations centred on Middlesbrough and the broader Teesside, where he and Cockrell employed threats and physical intimidation to enforce payments, amassing considerable influence over the area's drug trade and associated nightlife. By the early 1990s. Alliances formed during Duffy's time as a bouncer, and local clubs provided a foundation for these activities, leveraging his reputation for toughness to expand control. Accounts in the book Brian Cockrell and Lee Duffy, the Taxman, depict Duffy as a relentless in pursuing compliance, embodying a philosophy summarized by his motto to live by the sword, which underscored his aggressive methods, feuds, and violent incidents. Rivalry between Teesside hardman Lee Duffy and Tyneside enforcer Viv Graham emerged in the late 1980s, rooted in their overlapping roles as dominant figures in the North East nightclub and underworld scenes. While incarcerated together in Durham prison, the two clashed as self-assertive alpha males, with Duffy viewing Graham as a rival to his status as the region's top enforcer. This personal animosity was exacerbated by territorial disputes as Duffy sought to extend his influence beyond Middlesbrough and into Newcastle's vibrant nightlife, where Graham held sway as a respected doorman and protection figure. Following his release from prison in May 1990, Duffy's frequent visits to Newcastle clubs intensified the feud, where he clashed with local doormen, deliberately taunted Graham to provoke a confrontation described by contemporaries as a legend in Tyneside circles for his fearless demeanour and popularity amid the city's party scene. Duffy's incursions highlighted his expansionist ambitions, aiming to challenge Graham's control of the area's venues. These trips, often occurring nearly every weekend in the 15 months before Duffy's death, were marked by mutual disrespect, with Duffy sending proactive messages and seeking to assert dominance in the region rife with inner-city tensions. The feud reached its symbolic peak with an organised fight arranged by Newcastle gangster Stephen Sayers, a mutual associate, intended to settle their rivalry once and for all. However, Graham failed to appear, rendering the bout unexecuted and transforming it into one of the most legendary non-events in British gangland history. Sayers later reflected that Lee Duffy was the fighting man of Teesside and Viv Graham was the fighting man of Tyneside. It goes down as one of the biggest fights that never happened, underscoring how the episode fueled law around their brutal reputations and the broader struggle for North East nightlife supremacy. Lee Duffy engaged in a notable spat with Paul Sykes, a fellow ex-boxer and notorious hardman from Wakefield, during the 1980s. Their conflict arose from overlapping roles as bouncers and enforcers in the North East underworld, compounded by personal animosities during their time in Durham prison Despite the tensions, Sykes was respected by figures like Charles Bronson, and Duffy held a grudging regard for Sykes' reputation as a formidable fighter. Duffy's relationship with other prominent artmen often blended alliances and antagonism, amplified by his initial enmity with Brian Cockrell, the teeside enforcer known as the Taxman. The two first clashed violently in the early 1990s, with Duffy attempting to knock out a much larger Cockrell, leading to a pursuit for a rematch. However, they later formed a partnership to tax drug dealers, dealing drugs, money, and cars in joint operations that built on Duffy's establishment enforcement style. In contrast, Duffy maintained a close, enduring friendship with teeside hardman Stephen Sayers, forged in Low Newton Prison in 1982, involving mutual visits to blues parties and nightclub scenes without reported source trust. Duffy solidified his polarizing Marmite reputation, adored by allies, yet despised by foes, through numerous street brawls and club confrontations with local enforcers and doormen across Teesside and Tyneside. Notable incidents included single-handedly knocking out 4 bouncers at a Newcastle nightclub in a bid to taunt rivals, and overpowering groups of 3 doormen in rapid succession, feats that enhanced his aura of invincibility among criminal circles. Survived assassination attempts. Lee Duffy survived 3 known assassination attempts prior to his fatal stabbing in 1991, highlighting the rivalries within Teesside criminal scene. These attacks were linked to his role as an enforcer and taxman, where he demanded protection payments from local businesses and clubs, often clashing with rivals over territory and unpaid dues. The first attempt in late 1980s involved a shooting that left half of his foot shot off, along with a severe beating to his skull using a crowbar, orchestrated by rivals resentful of his extortionate activities. Duffy recovered from the injuries but continued his underworld operations undeterred. The second shooting occurred around 1990, following his release from prison, when Duffy was shot in the knee during a dispute linked to his enforcement activities. His resilience from years of boxing and street fighting allowed him to survive, further bolstering his tough reputation. The third attempt took place shortly before his death at the commercial pub in South Bank, Middlesbrough, amid escalating feuds, including possible ties to his rivalry with Viv Graham. Attackers poured petrol over Duffy in an attempt to set him alight, but their matches got wet, allowing him to escape serious harm through quick reaction. This incident heightened his paranoia. On August the 24th, 1991, Lee Duffy, aged 26, became involved in a violent street brawl on Martin Road in Middlesbrough, which escalated from a personal dispute at the blues party held at an Afro-Caribbean centre. The altercation began when Duffy exchanged heated words with David Allison, a former associate, inside the venue, creating a tense atmosphere as Duffy demanded space. The confrontation spilled into the adjacent car park, drawing a crowd of onlookers who gathered to witness the fight. The eyewitness accounts described a chaotic and brutal scene, with Duffy bare-chested and leveraging his boxing background, initially dominating the bare-knuckle struggle by repeatedly slamming Allison's head against the ground. Allison, equipped with a knuckle duster, was nonetheless overpowered in what witness called a fair and square beating, until a bystander passed him a knife. During a fray, Allison then stabbed Duffy under his left arm, causing Duffy to collapse in the middle of the road while calling for help. Police reports from the incident corroborated the involvement of multiple participants in the rapid escalation tied to Duffy's long-standing enmities in the teeside underworld, exacerbated by his history of surviving prior assassination attempts. Duffy was urgently transported to Middlesbrough General Hospital, but succumbed to his injuries at 3:55 a.m. on August the 25th, 1991, ending his notorious career in a manner reflective of the violent world he inhabited. Following the fatal stabbing of Lee Duffy on August the 25th, 1991, during a street brawl on Martin Road in Middlesbrough, local police initiated a prompt investigation drawing on Duffy's established rivalries within the teeside underworld to identify potential suspects involved in the altercation. The inquiry focused on the chaotic melee outside the Afro-Caribbean Centre, where multiple individuals were present, though primarily attention centred on David Allison, with prior connections to local disputes. Allison surrendered to authorities shortly after the incident and was arrested on suspicion of murder and faced charges of both murder and the lesser offence of manslaughter. His trial began at Teesside Crown Court in February 1993, where he claimed self-defence, asserting that Duffy had been armed with a gun. During the confrontation, after the deliberation, the jury acquitted Allison on all counts, highlighting the challenges in prosecuting untoward violence amid conflicting witness accounts. Separate legal repercussions arose from efforts to conceal evidence. Lee King was convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice for disposing of the murder weapon by dropping the knife down a drain, receiving a sentence that underscored the ongoing fallout from the case. No other individuals were successfully prosecuted for Duffy's death itself. The Duffy case spotlighted escalating gang violence in Teesside, prompting increased police scrutiny of the organised crime networks and contributing to regional initiatives against underworld activities throughout the 1990s. Please like this video, please comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.